Hello and welcome to The Artful Chef. We recently started a series on drawing the human form. So we started with drawing the hands in detail. Today we're going to be working on the eyes. So we're going to be doing a close-up drawing of the eye in a realistic form. And then you can come back next week. We're going to break it down each week. We're going to add the nose, the mouth, and then we're going to talk about how to proportion the face correctly and put all these things that we've learned how to draw into the actual drawing of a face. So let's get started. So let's talk about the steps necessary to take our blank paper from blank to this. So I have a couple of materials here that you don't necessarily have to have, but they're helpful if you have. I've got a couple different varieties of graphite pencils. I have a mechanical pencil for fine details. I have a micron pen for darker fine details, and some white gel pens to finish it off for that wet look. I also have some tortillons and some blending stumps. If you don't have either of these, you can take a piece of paper and roll it up to make your own, or you can use a Kleenex or Q-tips or even just your finger for blending. If you have erasers, if you have a kneaded eraser that you can make pointy, those are great for fine details. But if you don't have a kneaded eraser and you have an eraser that at least has a corner on it, that will work well. Or just a regular eraser, either like this or that you find on a regular pencil, will be fine. This whole artwork will be done in pencil, so it's not necessary for you to have anything else at this point for this lesson. So let's get started. We're going to begin by drawing a large circle. Well, not super large, but pretty decent size. We're taking up a large piece of paper, so we want to make sure that we utilize our space. If you're not comfortable with drawing perfectly round circles, that is totally understandable. You can trace something if you need to. I find that if I just start sketching and then add to it as I see where the need is, I can always go back later and erase any unnecessary marks because I am drawing very lightly. So this is our guide on where to begin. So this is going to be the representation of our eyeball. So our eye is a sphere with lids on it, if you think of it in that way. We're going to begin by drawing the iris first. So the iris is the colored part of the eye. So we're going to make another circle within this circle. This is going to represent our iris. And I'm going to make this side a little bit bigger so I can balance that out because it's not in the center. Alright, so there is the sphere, which represents the eye. We've got the iris in the center. The pupil is about half the size of the iris, so I'm going to draw another circle in the center. This is going to be my pupil. Now we're going to look at the eyelids. So when you open your eye, your top eyelid actually usually rests right along the top of the iris. You're not going to see the white above the iris. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to create this eyelid that comes to just to the top of the iris and over to the outside of this part. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom. We're going to come out and make this little curved part that you see in the corner of your eye. They're going to come down just below the iris and out here to this edge. So you should have something that looks like this. We don't need this line any longer, so I'm just going to clean this up and erase these unnecessary marks. Now, most eyes, when you draw them, are going to have some kind of a reflection from a light source, depending on where the light's coming from, what time of day it is, those kinds of things. We're going to draw a reflection in our eye. If your light source is coming from a square light in the ceiling, your reflection would be rectangular. If that reflection is being blocked by something, it might have an odd shape on the corner, or maybe it's light coming from a photographer's lamp, so that would be round. We're going to make ours semi-rectangular. I'm going to imagine that part of my light source is being blocked down here in the corner, so I'm just going to round that off. And this will be my reflection. Then I will erase the unnecessary mark that's within here because we don't want to see that. Then we're going to add another little reflection just right here within the pupil. We're going to shade that in just a minute. So we're going to begin by laying our pencil on its side so that you can get a wider mark. And we're just going to start to fill in the pupil. Now that we have our pupil shaded in, we're going to go in and we're going to add details to the iris. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to lightly shade the entire iris. Remember, this is a light value, so on a value scale, maybe like a 2 or 3. It's not white, but it's also not dark. We're going to add a lot of details to this area, so we don't want to do it too dark because we want to still be able to go in and add those details. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to draw a line that looks like a curvy ribbon. The more random, the better. You don't want it to be perfectly consistent, but you want to just draw this ribbon that goes around the iris, around the pupil. This is going to help us with our realistic details. After you've drawn your ribbon around your iris, I want you to imagine you're coming from the center of the pupil. And you're going to be drawing lines that radiate out to the edge of your ribbon. So if you come from the center each time, that's going to help you keep those lines looking like they're coming from the middle of your eye. They do not have to be all the same distance apart. It's actually more realistic if you have them varied in their widths. Remember to keep this part clean here and open because that is our reflection. So to help with the realism, we're going to go in and I'm going to take a softer lead pencil because right now I'm using an H. I want to use my 6B. Alright, so I'm going to use a softer lead here. I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start putting some shadows at the edge of the ribbon where the curves are. And And it does not have to be everyone. We're just creating some different value down here to add to the realism of the eye. We can always come back later and add more if we need to. This is just a beginning point. So I'm going to do a little blending here where I have added these details. Kind of bring them up. Now, where our pupil meets these lines that come out, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, I'm going to curve the edges here where they come out so it's not such a stark smooth edge on my pupil. So this is going to be a little more realistic. I'm just softening up this edge. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to leave a little bit of a space between the edge of the ribbon, and we're going to start creating shadows that come out to the edge of the iris. So it's better to start lightly and come in and add your layers. So I'm just going to make some marks that come out. Now I'm not going to touch the ribbon. Remember, we want to leave that space because it's going to create a little highlight there that's going to show those details that you've added. And you want to try to follow the pattern of your ribbon that you've created. It's going to help. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to blend this a little to see if I need to add some more value. You want the edge of the iris to be a little darker. So if it's not dark, you can always go in and you can add some more value to it after you have blended this in a little bit. Because as we talked about in the hand drawings, that would be more of an instantaneous color change because it is a separation of the iris from the actual white of the eyeball itself. So that's going to be a darker value. So I want to come in and add a little bit of darkness to the edge so I can create that contrast. Now, to break up the straightness of that line and make it more realistic, you can come in and do some little areas that come in so it's not so straight. That's going to help with realism. At this point, it's kind of like little scribbles along the edge. Now let's move on. We're going to come back and add some more details to this in just a little bit. We're going to move over to the corner of the eye. We're going to add an all over very light value first. Remember, this part right here represents the edge of the curved part of the eye. So we may have a darker value here, maybe down here in the corner, and then over here. I'm going to blend this. Now I want to do a very light value across the entire white of the eye. To keep the eye itself looking like a sphere, make sure that you are making your shading marks curved with the curvature of the eye, and that's going to help with keeping it looking like it's round rather than flat on your page. Now remember, we said that there is light coming from this direction. So we want to make sure that this side is darker. This side is going to be lighter because the light's coming from this direction. So our darkest area would be down in here. So we're going to add a little bit more value down here. And now we're going to draw in the eyelid, the curved part of the eye. So when you open your eye, you get this little crease. So we're going to draw this little crease that comes up like this and around the eye. And we also end up with that same little skin fold that is down here just below the eye. And you're just following the shape of the eye. Now we do have this larger fold that comes up here. So again, we're following the shape of the eye and we're coming down. This is going to represent that fold that you get when your eye is open. Now, the eyelid itself casts a shadow on the eyeball. So when you're looking at the eye, this darker part, or this part right below the eyelid rather, is going to be a little darker. So we're going to go in and we're going to add some shading up here to represent the shadow from the eyelid itself. And it's going to come all the way across here. Now remember, shadows, they're not straight lines. So you don't want this to be perfectly straight. It's okay if it's varying lengths. You want to make the edge just a little bit darker because that's going to represent that instantaneous change in value from the edge of the eyelid. I'm just going to blend this a little. And if your blending stump or your tortillon or whatever you're using has a little bit of graphite already on it, just be cautious of what you do with that because you might make areas darker than you want them to be if you're using a tip that is already dirty. So I'm going to go in and add a little bit more value to the bottom and define this edge a little bit. If you want to remove any lead or graphite to help with your highlights, you can go ahead and do that at any time that you feel like it's a little dark. I'm going to take a little bit of this away over here because this is where my light source is and I do want it to be just a little bit lighter over there in that area. Now I'm going to take my dirty tortillon and just go over the edges where I erased to soften them up. All right, so let's move on. Now we're going to talk about shading the skin around the eye. So you want to make sure you have darker values in these areas where you want these lines to be represented. So if this is the crease of the eye, I do want that to remain a little bit darker, as well as this skin that is right here above the top of the eye. So I'm just going to keep in mind my contour shading. So follow the shape of the eye. You don't want it to be totally straight. They need to be curved a little bit. And you're going to come in with a light value. Remember, it's going to be darker on this edge than it is on this because the light source is coming from here. So if you need to go back in and add a little value over here, just keep in mind that you need to keep that value in your crease. And those skin folds, that's how you keep that realistic look. And we're going to repeat that process under the eye as well. Now we're going to talk about lashes and how lashes look. So lashes are not all exactly the same. They don't go the same direction. They do tend to have a similar shape. So I'm just going to show you on the back side of this. If this is your eye, I want you to begin by looking at these areas. Okay, so 3 marks on top and 3 marks on bottom. The lash kind of resembles a J. So you're gonna have that little hook. Now, the lashes don't always go, like I said, the same direction. So if you want to make them varied, change the direction that they're coming from. Sometimes you will have clumps of eyelashes that come together, and that's okay. You can make more detailed eyelashes by using a very fine pencil, like a mechanical pencil. You can also go in and you can use a very fine micron pen to make them darker. So depending on if you're making a male or female eye, your lashes are going to vary just a little bit. So on a male's eyes, your lashes will be a little bit shorter. Lashes always tend to be heavier to the outside, shorter on thinner on the inside. So you'll make fewer marks here on the inside. They will get heavier as you go out. If you want the look of mascara, you want to make them a little darker. That's where using a micron pen or a very dark pencil would come in handy there. Also on the bottom, you will notice that the lashes on the bottom are a lot shorter, a lot smaller down here, just a little longer on the end. So keep those things in mind. Another thing that I want you to think about is where the lashes come from. So along the top edge here, they're going to come from the edge of the eyelid that's coming across. However, on the bottom, they don't really come from this part that actually touches. They actually come from that little, there's a little ledge that comes across here under the eye. So the eyelashes come from the edge of that ledge that's coming under there. So this second little line that you drew earlier, that's the ledge where your eyelashes go from. So we're going to begin our eyelashes by, like I said, we're going to do one in the center, one on the end, and one over here. So we're going to work our way across the top first, and then we'll come to the bottom. We're going to add them in. I'm going to make a female version of the eye, so my eyelashes are going to be a little bit fuller and a little bit darker. I'm going to do the whole process so that you can see as they come in. So, like I said, the kind of like a little J. You want to curve those out. Have some coming from different directions. Now that we have our lashes drawn in, to add to the realism, what we're going to do is we're going to create that bumpy texture that's right on the edge of your eye. So if you look at your eye very closely, you'll notice that it is not a very smooth straight line. So very roughly, I'm just going to come in with little circular motions, and in between these lashes, I'm going to add some shadows. That's going to create that nice unsmooth finish of the edge of the eye on the skin itself. And this will help with the realistic look of our picture. So on the upper lid, that extra color that you've just added should have gone up into the eyelashes, but when you're looking down at the bottom, these lashes at the bottom actually create a small shadow below the eyelashes. So we want to make sure that all of our extra color that we add at the bottom comes down rather than up. And so we're just going to go in and add a little bit of depth of color here in between these lashes to create that look of the skin. Also, I want to point out, we did say that the eyelid itself casts a shadow on the eye. So now is the time that you want to go in and just create a little bit darker value at the edge to represent that shadow. You can go in with a very fine pencil, like a mechanical pencil, and you can create shadows of the eyelashes within the eyeball itself. So some very fine lines coming onto the eyeball will create the look of a cast shadow of the eyelashes onto the eyeball. And the same thing into this reflected area here on the eye. So you can do a reflection of the eyelashes coming into that. Don't do a lot, just because it tends to be a little overkill, but you can add a few there. And you can add with your very fine pencil some reflections of your eyelashes on your eye. And less is always more. You never want to go overboard on this. So now that I have this part done, what I want to think about is, do I need darker values anywhere? Do I need more color in certain areas to help with the realism? So I do want to go in and add some little darker edges in here to my little ribbon, because I want to really define those details. And all I'm doing is I'm just going and adding a little bit of color to the edges of all these little points where they come out, so I can give it some dimension. And it does not have to be the whole entire, we're not tracing the edge. We're just adding a little pop of color that's going to give that some depth. Same thing with the edge of the iris here. Now that I have all my values everywhere else, I do notice that I need a more defined line. And if you notice, I'm not tracing the outer edge. I'm just doing some scribbles along the edge in different lengths that I am going to go in and I'm going to blend a little bit. If you get any areas where you feel like you've put too much, you can always go in with your eraser and you can take things away to make sure that you still see your highlights. So I'm going to go in right now and I'm going to add some details down here to darken up those wrinkles that kind of tend to fall right below the eye. I'm just going to add a little bit of darker value here to represent that. And I'm going to go in and just do a little bit of cross hatching here to show this skin. Now, I personally am not a fan of a stark white background. So for my students, I always ask that they give me something in the background. So all I've done here is to give it the look of some color, some value, but not necessarily a lot of detail. All I've done is I've done some large cross hatching on here. So if this is what was a student's work, I would expect something in the background. So I'm just going to very roughly with my pencil make some marks so I can do some cross hatching here, and very roughly then I'm going to just turn it the other way. You could always go a lot more detailed if you want, but this is just going to help the look of the picture so it's not so stark white with your eye right there in the center of it. And then just take a tissue and lightly just smudge it. Softens up those lines. So now we have a little darker background, which helps with our picture. And the last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go in and we're going to add the eyebrow. So for the eyebrow itself, you want to see these individual hairs just like you do with the eyelashes, but you need a base first to build on. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the arch for the eyebrow. So it can be however you wish it to be, but I'm just going to lightly, actually I'm going to use this 6B. I'm going to lightly draw in the shape of my brow. And all I'm doing is shading at this point. I'm going to add the details in just a minute. So after you've kind of drawn in the arch the way you want it to look, just blend that softly with your fingertip. This gives you a base color to build on, so it's already got a different value. That way when you go in and you start adding these individual lashes, they will have something that they are already on top of. So eyebrows typically tend to obviously go towards the outside. So I'm just going to individually go in and start drawing my little eyelashes, my eyebrows, sorry. Going across here, following the shape that I want to create. And I'm just going to keep filling that in until I have the thickness of the eyebrow that I want. And there you have a realistic eye. So if you want to come in and you want to create that look of wetness on your eye, if you have a white colored pencil or a gel pen, you can just come along here, and typically there's going to be a little area down here where you see a little moisture. You can add some white with your gel pen or your colored pencil there to add a little bit the look of moisture. You could go in, you could define a little bit of this area. I wouldn't do the whole entire thing, but if you want to make it a little brighter white there. And then typically over here in the corner of the eye, you have a little more moisture, so you could add some white over here to show that moisture that's in the corner of the eye. And you are done. Make sure you sign your artwork. Come back next week. We're going to talk about how to draw the eye from the side view. And then we'll move on to the nose and the other parts. I hope you enjoyed learning about how to draw a realistic version of an eye. Like I said, we're going to work on how to draw the eye from the side view. Then we're going to take that into how to put it on a face proportionately. And we will work on all the different features of the face 1 week at a time. So join me next time. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get the notifications when our new videos come out. And I will see you later.